There are many countries with unique and strange realities, but there is one place in the world where, for generations, intimate relationships were practiced without taking off their clothes. The reason? A mysterious island marked by such extreme repression that simple nudity was considered a mortal sin. A real and documented case that brought to light a hidden society in the middle of the 20th century, and which some still believe continues to exist. Don't miss this new video from Uncensored World, because today you will discover Ireland as you have never seen it before. One of the most fascinating and mysterious places on the planet. A surprising contrast when we consider that this country, known as the Land of Witches, is where Halloween was born and where ancient rituals were performed in which men and women danced naked around bonfires. The nation with the highest proportion of red-haired men and women in the world, women whom the ancient Romans considered as beautiful as they were dangerous, and who today continue to appear in many surveys as the most desirable on the planet. A country of extremes, as it has islands where people used to have sex fully clothed, yet also has beaches where people bathe naked. This duality has a lot to do with the fact that, despite being considered the richest country in Europe, many people leave due to extreme inequality and lack of opportunities. A region of extraordinary beauty, as there are more castles per square kilometer here than almost anywhere else in the world. Breathtaking cliffs and legendary causeways where, according to legend, giants once walked. Pay attention and don't miss this video because we assure you that everything in it will surprise you. Let's get started. They say that there are places in the world where magic is not just a legend, but part of the landscape, and this country is one of them. A green, wild, untamed island with mist-covered valleys and cliffs that seem to touch the sky. Many still believe in elves, fairies, and spirits that walk among the living. But you don't have to believe in the invisible or look to the past to feel that this country holds many secrets. And here you will discover what no one tells you. On this trip through Ireland, we will not only explore dreamlike landscapes, enchanted castles, and ancient Celtic legends, but we will go further, discovering hidden rituals and what is true about islands where relationships are maintained without taking off your clothes. As well as the many reasons why, despite being the richest country in Europe, and for many, the place with the most beautiful women on the planet, a large part of its society prefers to escape from this place. Ireland is an island located in the northwestern corner of Europe, but its geography goes far beyond the physical. It is also marked by a deep historical division. Although many people confuse it, the Republic of Ireland is not part of the United Kingdom. In fact, only Northern Ireland, the region occupying the northeast corner of the island, belongs to it. Both share the island's only land border, but their paths have been very different. The current Republic of Ireland separated from the United Kingdom in the 20th century after a long struggle for independence marked by political, cultural, and religious tensions. This process left deep scars, especially in Northern Ireland, where serious tensions between communities with different views existed for decades. Although peace is now the norm, the memory of those years still lives on in murals, streets, and testimonies. And it is impossible to understand today's Ireland without knowing that history. But as you will see later in this documentary, in this country nothing is black and white, and many of its realities coexist in a kind of magical balance. The entire country is a tapestry of green hills, rugged coastlines, and scattered villages. With an area of around 70,000 square kilometers, it is smaller than Portugal and has a fairly low population density, one of the lowest in Western Europe with just over 5 million inhabitants, which means that there are large regions that are practically empty, where you can drive for hours without seeing anyone, except perhaps a sheep or a legend. This relative solitude, combined with its changeable climate and mist-shrouded lands, has shaped a landscape that seems designed to hide mysteries and surely has much to do with its history. Due to its low population density, most Irish people live in cities such as Dublin, Cork, or Galway, although the truly fascinating things happen far from the urban centers. One of these fascinating curiosities is that, Although many people don't know it, it is officially the richest country in Europe in terms of gross domestic product per capita. This is a surprising statement, especially when we remember that just a few years ago, this country was at the center of one of the worst economic crises in Europe. It is even more puzzling when we compare it to powerhouses such as Germany or Norway. How is it possible that a small island with fewer inhabitants than many European cities now surpasses economic giants in wealth? The answer exists, but it is not so simple. Because behind this economic miracle, there is also a catch. Much of this recent wealth is due to the fact that the world's largest technology multinationals, such as Apple, Google, and Facebook, have established their European tax headquarters here, taking advantage of unique tax benefits. As a result, the figures are impressive but also misleading. Because even though the statistics say that people here live better than in any other European country, thousands of people emigrate every year due to a lack of real opportunities. But we'll talk about that later. Because, as contradictory as it may seem, this country is full of surprises, contradictions, and a beauty that sometimes only reveals itself when you decide to take a closer look. Few people know this, but Ireland is one of the countries with the most castles per square kilometer on the planet. Just drive along its country roads to come across moss-covered medieval ruins, wind-eroded fortresses by the sea, and lonely towers rising out of the fog. Among the most enigmatic is Leap Castle, considered by many to be the most haunted in the country. Apparitions, wailing, and even shadowy figures have been reported inside its walls. It is said that the famous elemental, a primitive spirit that smells of rotten flesh and, according to stories, has caused fainting and panic among visitors, can be found here. Added to this is the Bloody Chapel, a chapel where, during a family dispute in the 15th century, a priest was murdered by his own brother while celebrating Mass. Since then, many believe that his soul still haunts this place. But not all traces of Ireland's past have a bloody origin. On many isolated hills and fields, round towers still stand, built by Christian monks between the 9th and 12th centuries and known as cloitheach, meaning bell tower house. These structures were used to store sacred objects, hide from Viking attacks, and, in some cases, also as a symbol of spiritual power. When thinking about attacks, it is essential to understand the Celtic origins of this region, a reality marked by centuries of invasions and conflicts. Ireland was home to Celtic tribes for over 2,000 years. The Celts were not a unified people, but a collection of warrior clans who shared a language, symbols, and a deep connection to nature and magic. Their culture was steeped in sacred rituals, druids, and a spiritual worldview in which every tree, river, and hill had a soul. It is no coincidence that Halloween was born here, in this land of mist and ancient symbols, and that for centuries Ireland was known as the Island of Witches. But we'll explore that later, because now it's time to discover why Irish women were, and still are, considered among the most beautiful and desirable on the planet. To understand this, we must understand that these Celtic peoples soon attracted the attention and greed of the greatest empires. The first to approach were the Romans. Although they never completely conquered Ireland, a land they called Hibernia and saw as inhospitable and wild, they left behind fascinating chronicles. Stories of an island shrouded in mist, inhabited by untamed peoples and women of a beauty as hypnotic as it was dangerous. They described the inhabitants as fierce and free, and their women as true apparitions. According to authors such as Tacitus and Julius Caesar, in these northern lands they found the most beautiful women they had ever seen, but also the most indomitable. Celtic women were renowned for fighting alongside men, carrying hidden daggers, and mastering the use of herbs that could heal or kill. They were desired but also feared. Later came the Vikings, attracted by the gold in the monasteries and legends about the so-called women of fire. In many raids, they were not only seeking wealth, they also took women captive. Because in the Viking ports of northern Europe, Irish women were considered a treasure for their exoticism, and especially for their hair. This reality still persists today, with genetics playing a special role due to high levels of pheomelanin, a genetic variation that affects pigmentation, which has led to Ireland having one of the highest concentrations of natural red hair in the world. As a result, Ireland today has the highest percentage of redheads per square meter on the planet. It is estimated that approximately 12% of the population has this trait naturally, and that more than 30% carry the recessive gene, which means that it is very likely that redheads will continue to be born for generations to come. It is a fascinating phenomenon, especially in a globalized world where many traits tend to change over time. Here, however, fiery red hair persists. But these legends about beautiful women do not end in the past, as multiple dating site surveys, international rankings, and even sociological studies today continue to rank Irish red-headed women as the most desirable on the planet. Their combination of fair skin, freckles, vibrant hair, and a confident, sensual, and wild attitude has made them recurring fantasies. It's not just about physical beauty. There's an aura, an energy, an ancestral force that seems to accompany them from those times of swords and druids. If you enjoy these kinds of stories as much as we do, subscribe to Uncensored World and activate the bell. As you can see, we don't just travel here. We try to discover what few know and even fewer dare to tell. And there is still much to see. With all this in mind, it is no coincidence that many Irish legends feature women with red hair. Legends such as those of witches, which have a lot to do with the country's past. But why has this island been considered for generations as the island of witches? The answer lies in its essence. Ireland was one of the last lands in Europe to be Christianized, and one of the most resistant to external religious impositions. Before the arrival of Christianity, the Celtic world that dominated the island was deeply connected to the spiritual, the feminine, and the natural. Witchcraft, in this context, was not seen as an evil act, but as a form of ancestral wisdom. Witches were healers, herbalists, midwives, or druids, women who knew the secrets of the body, the stars, and the soul. Queen Meb, one of the most iconic figures in Irish mythology, is one of the best examples of this view. She was said to choose her lovers for their physical strength and vigor, to ride at the head of her army, and her libido was a symbol of fertility and leadership. Realities and legends like this meant that for centuries, the ancient Irish celebrated sexuality as a form of sacred union with the earth. As a result, during festivals such as Beltane, which was celebrated at the beginning of summer, many men and women gathered in the woods, lit bonfires, danced naked under the moon, and sealed carnal unions as fertility rituals. These practices were not considered immoral by these peoples, but part of the natural balance between life, death, and creation. These types of celebrations deeply disturbed the Church, which during the Middle Ages attempted to eradicate any manifestation of free sexuality, especially female sexuality. Although Ireland was fortunate not to experience witch hunts as brutal as those in Germany or Scotland, many wise women were silenced, accused of witchcraft or heresy, simply for maintaining ancestral practices or for not submitting to the new moral order. This reality has a lot to do with one of the darkest and most fascinating legacies that Ireland has given to the world, the Halloween festival. Although today we know it for costumes, candy, and horror movies, the truth is that Halloween was born in Ireland, and its roots have nothing to do with Hollywood, but rather with the Celtic worldview and its intimate connection with nature, as you are learning. It all began with the festival of Samhain, pronounced Samhain, celebrated by the Celts more than 2,000 years ago. This event marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter for them, but it was also a unique night when it was believed that the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead became so thin that spirits could cross it. During the Samhain festival, Celtic families lit sacred bonfires, dressed up in animal skins, and left food outside their homes to appease the wandering spirits. For them, it was not a night of fear, but one of respect, a dance between life and death, between the past and the present. With the passage of time and the arrival of Christianity, The church tried to absorb this pagan celebration, transforming it into All Saints' Day. In the Anglo-Saxon world, this night before All Saints' Day became known as All Hallows' Eve, which translates to the Eve of All Saints' Day. Over the centuries, this name was transformed until it gave rise to the word we all know today, Halloween. If you find this story as surprising as we do, give it a like so we know you want more content like this. But Ireland is more than just witches, Halloween, and haunted castles. In this country, magic springs from the stones, the sea, and the mountains, with legends that have endured for generations. One of the places that best represents this ancestral link is the mythical Giant's Causeway, located on the coast of Northern Ireland. The name can be seen from afar as this place looks like a road built by titans. The Giant's Causeway is made up of some 40,000 perfectly hexagonal basalt columns that rise like steps of a staircase disappearing into the ocean. The scientific explanation is that it was all caused by an ancient volcanic eruption that took place more than 60 million years ago. But the legend is much more exciting. According to legend, the Irish giant Fionn mac Cumhail built the stone causeway to cross the sea and challenge his Scottish enemy, the fearsome Banandonair. But as he approached and saw him up close, Fionn realized that his rival was much bigger than he had imagined, and he fled back home. There, his wife, cunning as few, devised a brilliant plan. She disguised Fionn as a baby and put him in a giant cradle. When Banandonair arrived looking for a fight and saw Fionn's supposed son, he froze. He surely thought, if that is the baby, what must the father be like? Terrified, the Scottish giant turned around and fled as fast as he could, destroying the causeway with his own hands so that Fionn couldn't follow him. Thus was born the Causeway of the Giants, a natural formation of more than 40,000 perfectly fitted basalt columns that look as if they were sculpted by supernatural hands. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most impressive landscapes in the country, where science and myth coexist as if they were part of the same story. And since we're talking about stories that survive the passage of time, few people know that the oldest pub in Europe, and therefore in the Western world, is also located in Ireland. This is Sean's Bar, a small charming pub located in the town of Athlone, in the heart of the country. According to historical records, this pub opened its doors in the 10th century and has been serving beer for over 1,000 years. Inside the pub, remnants of the original wattle and mud walls are still preserved, and its history has even been verified by the Guinness Book of Records. Among all the secrets Ireland holds, there is one that almost no one dares to talk about. But as you know, on this channel we don't just travel, we discover with new eyes. And what you are about to learn is a story as recent as it is disturbing, one that will make you see Ireland in a new light. Because we're not talking about ancient legends or tales passed down from generation to generation, but a real and documented case, albeit little known, that revealed a hidden society in the middle of the 20th century. A true story that surpasses fiction, a place so disconnected from the modern world that its customs seem to come from another time. This place is known as Inisb, which in Gaelic means small island, a fictional name chosen by anthropologist John Cowan Messenger to protect both the identity of its inhabitants and the exact location of the island. In the 1960s, this American researcher arrived on this tiny island off the west coast of Ireland, and what he discovered there perplexed the academic world. A community where intimate relationships, nudity, and even physical contact were considered potentially deadly sins. On this island, the body was a source of shame from birth. Women avoided seeing each other naked, even when washing. Men and women slept fully clothed. And when they had sex, usually within marriage and solely for the purpose of procreation, they did so without removing their clothes, as in this place, even talking about the body or desire was considered scandalous. Children in Inisb grew up in complete silence about their biology. There was no sex education, no explanations about pregnancy or childbirth. Pregnancies were seen as divine punishment, an inevitable consequence of the unknown. Now tell us, do you like red-haired men or women? Or do you prefer blondes or brunettes? How would you feel about having sex without taking your clothes off? Do you think places like this still exist, hidden from the modern world? Or do you think they should exist? Leave your answer in the comments. It helps us a lot to keep creating content like this every week and to grow this community. Plus, we love reading your comments, and you'll be surprised by what other people who are watching the same thing as you have to say. Thanks for being there. In Inisb, things as simple as kissing were forbidden, weddings were social agreements where affection barely had a place, and pleasure was seen as something dirty. This lifestyle was due in part to extreme isolation, as the island had little contact with the outside world, and in part to a rigid and dogmatic interpretation of Catholicism, which filtered into even the most intimate aspects of existence. And since the exact location of Inisb was never revealed, out of respect for the privacy of its inhabitants, there are still those who believe that this community could still be living in the same way, hidden among the hundreds of islands that dot the western coast of Ireland, probably far from the naturist beaches and lakes that also exist in this country, places where freedom and connection with nature are celebrated by sunbathing and swimming without clothes. Another facet of the Irish duality, a land of deep contrasts that we will discover at the end of the video. But before we discover these beaches that still divide the country, we will explore another equally shocking mystery. How is it that, despite having the highest gross domestic product per capita in Europe, thousands of people leave Ireland every year in search of a better life? What is happening in this wild land that makes so many want to leave? As we mentioned at the beginning of this documentary, according to the latest data from the International Monetary Fund, Ireland has a per capita GDP of over $140,000. At first glance, this makes it the richest country on the European continent. But is this really the case? Does this figure reflect the daily lives of most Irish people? For many, the answer is a resounding no, as much of this wealth does not belong to the people who live there, but to large multinational corporations that have chosen Ireland for its attractive tax system. This country has become a haven for technology, pharmaceutical, and financial companies, thanks to one of the lowest corporate tax rates in Europe, which is just over 12%. This means that the largest companies report billions in profits here, even though they actually operate in dozens of countries. It is a phenomenon that economists call GDP inflated by multinationals, and it creates an image of prosperity that does not always translate into real well-being for ordinary citizens. Meanwhile, due to realities such as this, housing prices have skyrocketed. In cities such as Dublin, many young people cannot afford decent rent, let alone buy a house. Average wages have not risen in line with the cost of living, and in many rural areas, there is a deep sense of neglect. Added to this is the crisis in the public health system and the shortage of social services in many regions of the country. So how is it possible that in a land with such official wealth, with dreamlike landscapes, and some of the women considered the most beautiful in the world, so many people want to leave? Perhaps because behind that perfect postcard image lies this complex reality, which makes many feel that they cannot and will not be able to build a decent future. Beyond these economic dilemmas, there are many reasons why living in Ireland is tempting for some. Among them, there is one that often surprises, because despite fairly cold temperatures for much of the year, Ireland has naturist beaches and lakes where people live without clothes. Although Ireland may not be the first destination that comes to mind for outdoor bathing, due to its changeable climate and the force of the Atlantic, there is a growing community that defends naturism as a form of freedom, mental health, and connection with nature. One of the most iconic places for this is Hawk Cliff in County Dublin, a small rocky area by the sea frequented by locals who practice skinny dipping or natural bathing. In addition, Lough Uller, a heart-shaped lake in the Wicklow Mountains, is another of those places where some escape from the world and their clothes. Although not officially regulated as in other countries, these practices are tolerated by society if carried out with respect, discretion, and in areas with little traffic. In summer, especially during the solstice and even on holidays such as Halloween. It is not uncommon to find groups celebrating contact with nature in the Celtic spirit of respect for the body and the earth. However, the most iconic image of Ireland is probably not found on any beach or forbidden island, nor on giants' causeways or enchanted castles, but on top of gigantic cliffs that seem to come from another world. The Cliffs of Moher, in County Clare in the west of the country, are impressive rock walls that rise more than 200 meters above the Atlantic and stretch for more than 8 kilometers. Due to their tourist appeal and protected status, these cliffs offer another way to commune with the wild. The wind blowing in your face, the roar of the waves, and the feeling of being on the edge of the known world. It's the best visual summary of this land of extremes that is Ireland. With everything you've learned about Ireland, and before we explain how to travel and enjoy this country to the fullest, we'd like to know, would you stay and live in a place like this? Or would you look for another land with more opportunities? We'd love to read your comments and hear your story, because this contrast is not unique to Ireland, and there are many countries currently experiencing these and other difficulties. At this point, you're probably wondering how to plan a visit to the mysterious and fascinating country of Ireland. At Uncensored World, we've gathered all the essential information so you can enjoy your experience in this land of eternal green, Celtic legends and surprising social contrasts to the fullest. The most common way to get to Ireland from South America or Central America is by flying with a stopover, usually in cities such as Madrid, Amsterdam, or London. From there are direct flights to Dublin, the Irish capital, which is usually the main point of entry. From the United States and Canada, there are better direct connections, especially from New York, Boston, Chicago, and Toronto. Once in Ireland, getting around is very easy. The main cities are connected by modern trains and long-distance buses, although to explore its most magical corners, such as cliffs, secluded beaches, and villages, we recommend renting a car. Just keep in mind that in this country they drive on the left. As for the cost of living, Ireland is not a cheap destination, and you'll notice this from your first coffee. A basic coffee can cost between 3 and 4 euros, while a pint of beer in a traditional pub such as Sean's Bar, the oldest in the world, founded around 1900 as you now know, costs around 6 euros. A night in a hotel for 2 people in a city usually costs between $70 and $120 depending on the season. In terms of safety, Ireland is considered a fairly safe country. Crime rates are low, especially outside the big cities. But as with any tourist destination, it is advisable to exercise the usual caution, especially in areas with pubs at night or in outlying neighborhoods. And if you're thinking of staying longer, the possibility of finding employment depends on the type of visa and your nationality, but it's quite likely that you'll find a good job given the realities you've encountered. For European citizens, moving around and working is easy. For Latin Americans, there are some limited visa programs such as the Working Holiday Program in countries such as Argentina, Chile, and Mexico. You've reached the end of the video. Did you enjoy this unfiltered trip through Ireland? Then don't hesitate. Subscribe now and turn on the bell, because every week on Uncensored World we take you to discover fascinating places with stories that few people know about, and that will leave you speechless. If you also believe, like us, that the real world is better than fiction, don't miss the next video, where we show you one of the most fascinating and unknown corners of the planet. Click now, because what you're about to see will surprise you.